after Ya'juj and Ma'juj, there shall be a period of luxury and peace, the likes of which this world has never seen since the beginning of time. The amount of peace and luxury that will take place, our Prophet ﷺ mentioned that one romana, one grapefruit or one pomegranate will suffice an entire tribe. And one shank of lamb will be eaten by an entire subdivision of a city. In other words, the earth will give like never before. And in one version, it says that the snakes will play with the toddlers, and the lions and the wolves. The wolves will play with the lambs, for example. Right? These phrases are found. What we see in this is that after all of that fighting, years and years of Dajjal and Ya'juj and Ma'juj and whatnot, and we don't want to be alive when that happens, those that live through, Allah will give them some peace. And this is the sunnat Allahi fi khalqihi. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Fa inna ma'al usri yusra and inna ma'al usri yusra. This is the sunnah of Allah. Those people that saw the worst of the worst, and we do not want to be amongst them. We should seek refuge in Allah from living to see Dajjal. Na'udhu billahi min fitnati Dajjal. We don't want to be around when Dajjal comes. We don't want to be here. But if those people that are here, and they manage to eke through those years of turmoil and trial, that generation, then they shall be blessed like no other generation has been blessed since the beginning of time. How long will this time frame be? Some hadith mention 7 years. And are these 7 years or another? Allah knows best. But there will be a few years. And this is proven by our Prophet ﷺ saying, Wallahi, he gave a qasam to Allah. You shall perform Hajj and Umrah to the Kaaba even after Ya'juj and Ma'juj. That's these years now. Now the fact that you're performing Hajj and is performing means there's more than one Hajj. For a few years, there shall be peace in this world. No fighting. No two people will fight one another. Can you believe? That has never happened since Habil and Qabil. Has never happened. But Allah will bless those people when they have seen how evil war is. For those years, no two people will ever have an argument. Khalas. Utter peace on this earth. Now, unfortunately, what we learn with that peace and stability, some people's hearts, or maybe the next generation that is born or whatnot, their hearts will become hard and lack iman. And we'll explain why in a while. But these years will be the best years of all of mankind, but we don't want to live to see them because we have to go through something to see them. And eventually, something will happen. Isa will either die or whatnot, or Mahdi will die. We don't know when, by the way. And by the way, there are legends found that Isa, we can say sallallahu alaihi wasallam for Isa, we can say rahimahullah ta'ala. All of this is allowed for Isa and for any righteous person, by the way. Isa, rahimahullah ta'ala, and sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no problem, shall, according to some reports, die a natural death and be buried in the hijr of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. Where do we get this from? By the way, this is not an authentic hadith, but there are such a hadith. Of them is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, which is not authentic. I'm going to come to that. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, ينزل عيسى ابن مريم إلى الأرض. Isa will come down to this earth. فيتزوج, he will get married. ويولد له, and children will be born to him. ويمخث 45 سنة, and he will live for 45 years. He was taken up at the age of 33. So he will live till he's 45. So another 13 years or so. And this would make sense with all that we have said. ثُمَّ يَمُوتُ فَيَدْفُنُ مَعِي فِي قَبْرِي. Then he shall die and he shall be buried with me in my qabr. Then I and Isa ibn Maryam will stand up together, and between us will be Abu Bakr and Umar. Now, this hadith is reported in a number of very, very obscure books that none of you would have heard of. Ibn Abi Dunya mentions it, and Ibn al-Jawzi in his Al-Ilal al-Mutanahiya, and Al-Muntazam, and Al-Wafa, and all of them say that this hadith is very weak. It is very weak. Some of them say it is even munkar. So it's not an authentic, because there's a very well-known person in there by the name of Abdurrahman al-Afriqi, who was known to be a very weak narrator. So the hadith is not authentic. There is a narration in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, but it's not a hadith. Abdullah ibn Salam. Who is Abdullah ibn Salam? The ex-rabbi of Medina. He was the senior most rabbi of Medina when the Prophet ﷺ came, Abdullah ibn Salam. There is a report in Sunan al-Tirmidhi. You can look this up if you want. It's a very famous book, Tirmidhi. You can find this at home. And I've always encouraged you, look up the books of hadith. Don't be shy to look them up and open. What do you lose? They're not going to bite you. Read them. Get connected to your tradition. Hadith number 3617. Abdullah ibn Salam said. Who said? Abdullah ibn Salam. Not the Prophet ﷺ. Abdullah ibn Salam said, it is written in the Torah, the description of the Prophet ﷺ. And it is written in the Torah, the description of Isa ibn Maryam. And the two of them will be buried together. Who said this? Abdullah Salam. It is not a hadith. Is that clear? Where is he getting it from? His version of the Torah. It's clearly not around in our times, by the way, right? Because realize the Jewish Arabs of that time, they have a different tradition altogether. Their traditions and their calendar is different. We know this. Again, I'm going to my tangents here, but anyway, they are not connected to the mainstream Jewish diaspora that was alive at the time. They have been disconnected for a few centuries or a few decades, at least a century. And so their beliefs and their books are slightly different. And that is very interesting, because then we get a window into a preserved Judaism that didn't exist in Babylon or in other places in the world, or in Jerusalem as well. But apparently, Abdullah ibn Salam has some books handed down generation to generation that the rest of Jewish folklore doesn't have anymore. And in it, he is saying, I am telling you that Isa and Muhammad ﷺ are going to be buried together. One of the narrators of this hadith, the third narrator from Abdullah ibn Salam, a tabi'i, he said, and there is still a space in the hijr of the Prophet ﷺ that can accommodate Isa ibn Maryam. Now that is a fact. That is a fact. What is a fact? That in the room of Aisha, the three bodies are this way, and there is one portion that technically there is still space for one more body over there. That much is a fact. Whether it will be Isa or not, we say, what do we say? Very good. You guys are learning. Allahu A'lam. There's nothing authentic, but Abdullah ibn Salam is no joke. He is the chief rabbi, and he is saying, I'm telling you the two will be buried together. So Allah knows best. So perhaps Isa will die a natural death, and perhaps he will be buried in Medina, or perhaps that is not going to happen. Now what's going to happen with the followers of Isa, the righteous Muslims? This is where the end of times, the actual end of times begins. And it will begin with a very peaceful ending. What is that peaceful ending? Sahih Muslim reports from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah will send a wind from Yemen that is softer than silk, that shall not leave anyone that has an ounce of iman in his heart, except that he shall pass away. Peaceful death. Hadith is in Sahih Muslim. A wind will come from Yemen, beautiful, fragrance, sweet. It will be gentler than silk. And when the people smell it, if they have iman, they will die a peaceful and natural death. And if they don't have iman, they're still going to be there. Jayyid. Now, what do you think is going to happen when in the whole earth nobody of iman is left? What do you think is going to happen? This is what our Prophet ﷺ said, that after this point in time, idolatry will return to the Arabs. And by Arabs, he meant the children of the Muslims, because when you said Arab back then, you meant a Muslim as well. That, and he mentioned specific tribes, and he said the women, their bodies will be doing tawaf around the tribes of the ancient. And the people, he said, will become worse than baha'im, worse than animals. And they will copulate in public like donkeys. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. That might happen. Now, this hadith is mentioned as pre-Qiyamah and as also end of Qiyamah. So Allah knows best. It appears that there will be a time where fahisha will be prevalent even before the Mahdi. And then there will be a time that will become even more prevalent before the actual trumpet is going to be blown. Now, if there are no Muslims, what will happen to the kalima? What will happen to the salah? What will happen to the Quran? What will happen to all of these? Abdullah bin Mas'ud said, a time will come, a night will come, that the entire Quran will be taken back by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people will wake up and the mushafs will be blank. And there will be no one with the Quran in their hearts. This is a report in Musnad ad-Darimi. In another version, he said to his students, make sure you read the Quran before it is taken away. The students said, oh teacher, these mushafs, how can they be taken away? And us huffaz, how can it be taken away? And Ibn Mas'ud said, a night will come when the Quran will be taken away and nobody will remain who can recite a single verse. And they will even forget La ilaha illallah. And they will speak the speech of Jahiliyyah. Means they're going to talk the fahisha, vulgarity, evil stuff. And this is when Allah Azza wa Jalla's statement, وَإِذَا وَقَعَ الْقَوْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ أَخْرَجْنَا لَهُمْ دَابَّةً مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ تُكَلِّمُهُمْ النَّاسَ كَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. This is Surah An-Naml verse 82. This is when this statement is going to happen. What is this statement? It talks about the beast. And we'll talk about the beast inshallah. Definitely not today. We're going to get to that inshallah in our next class. Inshallah, the next Wednesday inshallah. In another version, Ibn Mas'ud said that the Quran will be taken away in one night. And not a single verse will be left in the qalb of any servant. And not a single mushaf will remain with the speech on it. And the people will wake up like animals. Now, it is pretty obvious, therefore, that you put the previous hadith and this one together. The day that wind blows is the day the Quran will be forgotten. Not forgotten, but gone. And even those that had memorized some surahs or verses, but they weren't mu'mins, they will wake up the next day and they will remember nothing. And the physical printed mushafs, they will become empty. Nothing will be there. What will happen to the kalima? Sahih Muslim, Anas ibn Malik said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى لا يقال في الأرض الله الله. This is in Sahih Muslim. Qiyamah will not take place. Qiyamah will not take place until no one says on this earth, Allah, Allah. Think about that. This is a hadith in Sahih Muslim. Qiyamah will not take place until nobody says Allah. Is gone. Wal-iyadhu billah. When will that happen? Obviously after the wind comes. Hudayfah ibn al-Yaman said, Yudrasul Islam. Islam will be wiped away. Darasa yudrasu here means to wipe away. Just like a garment that is continually worn is worn out until no one will know what is siyam and what is salah and what is hajj and what is sadaqah. Subhanallah. Salah is going to be gone, sadaqah gone, hajj gone, everything gone. Islam will be wiped away until no one knows what anything is. And in one night the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be wiped away as well until not a single ayah remains. Now, this is very interesting because this is Hudayfah ibn Yaman saying it from the Prophet ﷺ, and Ibn Mas'ud also said it from himself. The two put together clearly shows this is an authentic thing. Okay, this is from Hudayfa ibn Yaman saying, I heard it from the Prophet ﷺ. The previous narrations, Ibn Mas'ud is just saying like it is. However, if you remember, what did we say? When a Sahabi says something about the knowledge of the unseen, what did we say? It becomes a hadith. When a Sahabi says something about knowledge of the unseen, this is Ibn Mas'ud describing Judgment Day. Automatically it gets a free upgrade to a hadith, as we said. Because how does he know Judgment Day? What does he know about? How does he know to, unless it comes from the Prophet ﷺ? So Hudayfa said, and a night will come where the whole Quran will be taken away, and there shall be remaining a small group of people. Al-Shaykhul Kabir wal-Mar'atul Ajuz, an elderly man or an elderly lady, very old people, and they will reminisce and they will say, we remember our forefathers saying, La ilaha illallah, but we don't know what it means. So we also will just say it like they said it. So Sila ibn Zufar, the student of Hudayfa, said, O Hudayfa, of what use will it be that they say La ilaha illallah and they don't know what it means, and they're not praying, and they're not fasting, and they're not giving charity, and they're not going for Hajj? Now pause here. This hadith is a very deep theological issue that is not related to signs of Judgment Day, but it is very interesting because this hadith is one of the evidences used. And I'm just going to mention it briefly, and that is, what does it mean to be a Muslim? What does it mean to be a Muslim? Is it enough to say you're a Muslim and not do anything? There are so many in this land. We seek Allah's refuge, our own children and grandchildren, meaning the Muslim communities. There are so many whose parents are, mashallah, the best of the best. Board members, imams, du'at, coming Fajr Salah. And their sons and daughters have nothing to do with this religion whatsoever, other than the title, I'm a Muslim. They will not even take off Friday to come and pray Jumu'ah. They will not even care about Eid. But if you ask them, they say, oh, I'm a Muslim, yes. My parents are Muslim, yes. It's very common. Are they Muslim? Some ulama said no, some ulama said yes. And those that said no have a long list of evidences. Those that said yes, they primarily use this hadith. Because this is a man or an old man who is going to say he doesn't pray, he doesn't fast, he doesn't do anything, but he simply says, yeah, I remember my forefather saying this word, I don't know what it means. And by the way, another tangent, completely irrelevant, yet so relevant. The Muslims who came to this land as slaves, they were not able to preserve their religion. They were not able to preserve their Islam completely. Allahu Alam how many Muslims came, but they are in the tens of thousands in the very least. Think about that, by the way. In the tens of thousands, Muslims were brought here from West Africa, from the coasts of Africa, from what is now Senegal and these regions. They were brought here as slaves. We know so many of them. Ayyub ibn Sulaiman, we know. And Bilali, we know. We know them, we have pictures of them. We have handwritten documents in the Smithsonian. We still have Qur'ans that they wrote from memory. We still have them in this land. These were slaves that had memorized the Quran. Some of them were ulama, some of them were princes. They came here. And interestingly enough, this is a complete tangent, but hey, we should know this stuff. We are, in the end of the day, American Muslims, and we should know our own Islamic history in this land. A very interesting quirk, by the way, and I'm watching the time, don't worry, and I did promise you Q&A. Everything is there, inshallah. But let me go into this tangent. It's not prepared, but it's very interesting. There was this slave owner back in the 1800s who came across a Muslim slave and appreciated the Islam of that slave and realized Muslims are educated, Muslims can manage finances, and Muslims are trustworthy. So he made it a point to purchase Muslim slaves. And he had a plantation off the coast of Georgia on an island called the Sapelo Islands. The Sapelo Islands is called. Okay? This is all history you should know. And so on the Sapelo Islands, there was a large concentration of Muslim slaves, believe it or not. And they would establish the salah. They had a masjid. That is actually the first masjid of America. They celebrated Eid. How do we know this? Because the owners and the descendants of the owners kept diaries. And they talked about these Muslim slaves. And they mentioned that there was a festival in which they baked a particular cake that we now know it was the cake that Muslims would bake on Eid al-Fitr back home in Senegal or whatever. They would bake it on once a year and they would hand it out. This is in the Sapelo Islands. So this is in the 1860s, 1870s or so. Okay, obviously slavery is abolished, everything changes, whatnot. Okay, Sapelo Islands remains disconnected from the mainland. In the 1930s, Harvard University, or I should say Harvard, they sent a group of anthropologists to study the descendants of slaves. And they have a very, very extensive archive of audio, video material, audio, because they wanted to preserve the accents, they wanted to preserve the heritage, and video footage, not just in Sapelo, across America. It was a very, very well-researched project. And they went to the Sapelo Islands as well, obviously. And they interviewed the grandchildren of those people. They interviewed people in their 80s and 90s who have memories of their ancestors 3-4 generations ago. And what you read is mind-boggling. Of what you read, one of these people says, I remember I had an uncle so-and-so. Us kids would always make fun of him because he would go to one of the corner trees and fall flat on his face a few times a day. And another lady says, I had an aunt that she would always say phrases that would make us children laugh. And she said, I don't remember exactly, but it's something like Ashmada gada, Ashmada gada, Ashhadu Allah. It begins Ashmada. That's what she remembers. This is in 1940. And she remembers one of her ancestors. She said my aunt Henrietta, whatever, would always have something on her head. She said this. And she would always say these phrases that would make us kids laugh. And this is a lady in 90 years old. So go back, we're talking about 1860. And this is a lady now who came maybe in the 1830s. And she has a phrase that she is saying. Of course, these children are no longer Muslim. Islam is all gone, right? Obviously. But this hadith reminds us of that. That Islam is gone, but some phrase remains. So it's not just towards the end of times. Another story quickly. This is not planned, by the way. I just want to benefit myself and all of you. And inshallah, what I like about teaching in my hometown, we have no deadline. When I go somewhere else, I have a deadline, I have to leave. When I'm here, alhamdulillah, we can go on and on. If I spend another 2 weeks, what's the problem? We can benefit, inshallah, correct? Inshallah. If Allah gives us life, inshallah. So, another interesting anecdote and story. And this happened with me, or I met the person. Andalus. And inshallah, we will have a long series of Andalus someday, inshallah. It's one of my favorite topics, the detailed history of Andalus, the rise and fall of the Muslims of Andalus. And this is something that I met in Andalus, where there was a person who converted back in the 80s to Islam, an Andalusian, from some of the villages outside of Qurtuba, not in the main cities. Make a long story, it's a very long story, make it short, inshallah one day I'll tell it to you in its full detail, that he was scared that his Catholic family, and especially his grandmother, who was a very hardcore Catholic, would get angry at him. So he would lock the door when he prayed. When he visited his grandmother, he would lock the door and pray. And one day he thought he locked the door and he didn't. You know, sometimes you turn the key, and his grandmother opened the door and he was in sajda. And he panicked, but what are you going to do? And his grandmother sat down next to him and began to cry. And the man became flustered, like, what am I going to do now? What do I tell my grandmother, etc., etc. He said the salam, and then he consoled his grandmother. Grandmother, don't worry, I still love you, everything is fine, I'm normal, everything fine. And the grandmother said, no, I'm not crying because you converted to Islam. I'm crying because my grandmother told me that we are of those Muslim families, and to preserve Islam, at least in knowledge that we are Muslim. And I didn't do that. Like, we know we're from the Muslim descendants, But I didn't do that, and seeing you prostrate, and obviously it's a Muslim sign, we know what it is, right? It obviously put all of these emotions back into me. So once again we get this phrase of this, she knows she's a Muslim. She knows, but she doesn't do anything like that, right? So there are exceptional scenarios. And back to this hadith now. The question is, are you a Muslim if you don't do anything? I will give you the mainstream response. This is my response as well. The general rule is that if you're living in a land of Islam, or in a land where Islam can be practiced, and you refuse to lower your head in sajda even once, and you refuse to fast even once, and you refuse to do anything of Islam, then mere self-identification does not make you a Muslim. However, in exceptional circumstances like the Sepelo Islands, like Andalus, like right now what we're going to mention, the end of the hadith, in those circumstances, maybe there is an excuse. That excuse is only when you don't have access to other Muslims, when you're all alone, when you're persecuted. In that case, if you don't do anything other than say, I'm a Muslim, perhaps that will be enough for you. And this is proven in this hadith. And now we come back to this hadith, and then we'll pause for today, inshallah ta'ala, and give you at least 6 minutes for Q&A, inshallah. Hudayfa said, a time will come when the Quran will lift it up, nobody will pray, nobody will fast, nobody will do this. His student said, of what use is to say the kalima without doing any of these things? And Hudayfa turned away, turned away, turned away. The third time he said, Ya Sila, O my student whose name is Sila, Ya Sila, it will save them from the fire of hell. That kalima will save them from Jahannam. So when there's nothing left, perhaps identifying with Islam is all that is needed. But this is an exceptional situation and scenario. Now what this also shows, an elderly man will say, I remember my forefathers say La ilaha illallah, which means there shall be an entire generation that is raised after the wind of Yemen. There will be at least 40, 50, 60 years. And in that generation, the new generation that comes, maybe simply knowing there's something called Islam and wanting to be it could be their excuse. But the default will be, these people will be the worst of the worst. They will be animals or worse than animals, because there is no salah, there is no Quran, there is no kalima, there is no morality. They will live like animals, and we will come inshallah next week. Upon this generation shall be the actual trumpet, but there's still a few more signs that need to be mentioned before the coming of the actual trumpet. And with that, inshallah, we open the floor for questions, inshallah ta'ala. Who's going to be first? For 3 weeks I've been delaying questions. Yes, go ahead. Bismillah. So our brother says one of the issues is to believe in the ghaib. Why can't we just say that Ya'juj and Ma'juj is from the knowledge of the ghaib, like the angels? A valid point, because according to the mainstream interpretation, Ya'juj and Ma'juj are human beings, not unseen, seen. You can flesh and blood. They are the children of Adam. And my point that I said last week, are we required, is the Quran and Sunnah explicit and unequivocal that there are tens of millions of human beings living behind some wall right now as we speak? And my response was, looking at the text, no. Do you understand this point? If you understand Arabic, taban. Is it qat'iyyat dalala? Is it something that is unambiguous, 100% we have to believe? Because on the other hand, we have some very, very difficult scientific facts to match up with this belief. Our religion does not tell us to be foolish. Our religion does not tell us to discard, because if we did that, we wouldn't be using our computers right now. We wouldn't be using technology. Our religion doesn't tell us to live like cavemen. We acquire knowledge and we use our intellect in a manner that Allah allows us to use the intellect. So if the Quran and Sunnah told us explicitly that there are a million people living somewhere and we don't know where they are, that would have presented us another issue. And we would have said, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا الْعِلْمَ الْغَيْبِ. But when it doesn't, can we then rethink through? even if it means that we are saying something that our previous generations of scholars did not say. And I don't have a problem with that. And that's what I posited. Now, if you wish to believe what most of classical and medieval Islamic history believed, I don't have a problem with that. Like I said, what can I say? That's your belief. Exactly the point. I agree with you. The brother said, now we know that that opinion cannot be true. Where did you get this from? Our knowledge of modern science. It cannot be true in my opinion and the opinion of anybody who really understands. That's exactly what I said last week. Were you here last week? That's exactly what I said. It is ghaib, but at the same time, when our young men and women come and challenge us, what do we do with this? We have to present an interpretation. I could be wrong. And when it happens, we will see. I don't want to see it. You guys tell me if I'm right or wrong in the akhirah. I don't want to see when that happens. But I'm trying to preserve the iman of our youth in this interpretation. That's my goal. Sisters, any questions? Going once, going twice. Back to the brothers. Bismillah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, I did go over it in a lot of detail. If you can listen to my lectures online, inshallah. Go ahead, yeah. Yes, we went over this. Imam Mahdi is from the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ, and we would say he's from Hassan's descendants, not Hussein's. Sisters, anyone try? Sisters, back again to the brothers. Yes, go ahead, yes. We don't know. How many signs were told by Isa? We do not know. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, then the conversation continued until it came to this. What did happen? We do not know. Okay? Back to the brothers. Yes, go ahead. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So our brother says that the signs don't seem to mention the world of the jinn. Will they also witness all of these things? Obviously, when this world comes to an end, the jinn will also come to an end in this world. So yes, the signs are the same for us and them. If you're trying to allude that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj might be the jinn, you're not trying to do that. Okay, that would be a very, very good and easy way to explain it, were it not for the fact that the ahadith are pretty clear that they are from the dhurriyyah of Adam. This hadith is in Bukhari. They're from the children of Adam alayhi salam. Okay? Insha'Allah ta'ala. We'll continue. Our last Wednesday will be on this next week, insha'Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Let the power of media improve your connection to your deen and make a positive impact on your life. Download the One Islam TV app today and embark on a transformative journey of knowledge, inspiration, and spiritual growth.